Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the next episode of the Cathode Ray podcast. I'm here with my friend Steve Nutter, and we are joined today by a familiar face. This is Joe, a.k.a. Scarlet Sprites. We're just going to talk about hardware, retro, arcade, all things that Joe's into. Steve, Joe, how you doing today, gentlemen?
Hey, Lewis. Thanks for having me.
Great, yeah. Awesome to see Joe again. Joe and I, we spoke a second ago. We had an opportunity to meet in person at the Retro World Expo briefly. And so it's good to catch up back again with him, and it's been a while.
Yeah. It's coming up on a year almost. It's hard to believe.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's hard to believe.
The conferences. Steve's now the ambassador of how much does it cost to getting in there. So, Joe, you don't. Most people might know you for your extensive arcade collection and your passion for redoing pulling these things together. Sorry, it's 5 a.m. for me, so I'm trying to pull together words here for your arcade collection there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I had a few. So before we get into individual things, and you were talking about your Mortal Kombat and your different things there, I want to step back with your love of all arcades and even to ask, like, how the fuck are you fitting all this stuff in? And it's not easy to do. I live on the 5th floor. I don't have any arcade machines, right?
Yeah.
So I want to step back there with your love of arcades and how this kicked off.
Yeah, I mean, I always talk about Neo-Geo being like the gateway drug into arcade gaming, right? Like, that's how it all starts, because it's truly like the bridge between the console and the arcade world. Probably shortly after I got out of college, I want to say it's like 2007-ish, 2006 maybe. I started collecting Neo-Geo carts, like the MVS cartridges, just because I thought they were cool. I had no way of playing them. Didn't know what I was going to do with them, but I thought, I'm buying Metal Slug because I think that's really cool. And eventually, like, the goal was to pick up a MVS cabinet and have it. But I was living in a 1-bedroom apartment at the time, like right out of college. So that continued for a while, and I was just playing via emulation, and that's how it went. But I continued to collect those cartridges, and then eventually, I did pick up an MVS cabinet, and it all kind of spiraled out of control from there, because you start learning more and more about the cabinet. After you have it, you start going through it and looking at it, and what can I fix? What can I enhance? What else can I play in this? And then the candy cabinets come, and then you're on Craigslist looking at stuff, and things were still cheap, relatively, like 10 years ago, things were still pretty cheap. So, and I was fortunate in the last few years. There was a big warehouse about 90 minutes south of me that they were just unloading stuff left and right. And so I'd go down there and pick things, and they'd do auctions every now and then, and you pick up machines for, sometimes as cheap as like $200. So that's kind of a little bit of the background on all of this. It all started with Neo-Geo.
When you started to just pick them up, I mean, you're straight out of college. I can't imagine you're on a massive wage back then, as we all were. So you're, that must have been the golden age of the Neo-Geo cheap cart. Or
yeah, stuff
priced.
Was still pretty. Like MVS cartridges were really cheap back then, and when I say really cheap, I mean even now some of the fighting games, some of the things that were mass produced, like your Fatal Furies, some of the King of Fighters titles, Samurai Showdown seems to be pretty common still. You can still pick those up. Like, I mean, I haven't looked lately, but I think they're probably like $50-$60 for some of those, right? But yeah, back then, a lot of that stuff was dirt cheap. Magician Lord and some of those titles that were first run, 1975. That stuff was pretty common, and you could just go out on eBay, and people were trying to unload it, and I was like, yeah, let me get it. And I mean, at that point, you could even be picky about the labels, and looking at it and like, oh, that has a little scratch on it, or there's a nick in the corner, and you pay an extra $1 or $2 for something that was pristine. And now you try to go out and find stuff like that, it just doesn't happen.
Yeah, I would say actually when I saw a few Neo-Geo carts when I was in Japan, and yeah, the common stuff, and you spoke of Samurai Spirits, sorry, yes.
Yeah, in Japan,
and, yeah, that was still available. That is interesting with some of the old stuff, that sometimes the things that we love are actually the available things in the collecting category because they were the common ones that the big game that you love, and it's around.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Steve, how's your Neo-Geo? What have you? You got the big red there as well.
Well, that's good. I mean, yeah, I've got the big red and the MiSTer Cade. I finally just had to put the MiSTer Cade in because I was tired of the big red 4-slot machine just not working. Like half the time I'd be like, yes, I'm going to go out and fire the machine up. And then I'd be sitting there, it's like 10 times worse than the Nintendo. This one, mine did. And finally it stopped working. But I got into mine like right before, and my machine, like right before people went absolutely nuts for the stuff. And that was kind of the reason I knew it was like the guy listed it locally, the machine. It was like $250 for the machine working. So, but it's interesting how many, so like before you actually got the MVS, Joe, how many carts do you think you'd accumulated before you got to actually play one of them?
Oh, maybe 3 dozen or so, like just these black cartridges, just, girlfriend asking like, what the hell are you doing with these? Like, why, like what's the point of all of this? Or somebody would come in and just see them like and again, it was a 1-bedroom apartment. So, that stuff would be like stacked or in boxes like back. Cause my bedroom was my office and my bedroom at that time. And just these cartridges just stacked back there. People ask like, what the hell is that? Is that like Nintendo? I'm like, yeah, it's Nintendo. Like, but you can't play it,
So that, when you finally, like, did you ever, before you got the machine, did you ever look and like consider one of the crazy early edition consoleized? Did you ever like even look at that stuff when it was
I
on
knew,
eBay and things?
Yeah, like I knew of it. I knew guys were doing that. I just never took the plunge because it was still expensive because at the time, like I couldn't do the work myself. I didn't have the tools, didn't have the time, right? Like, so it just wasn't something I was that interested in, because to me it was like the goal always was, I want to have a big red in my house. Like that was the goal. And I'm like committed to this because like I said, there's 3 dozen cartridges. I'm in it. I'm invested, space wise, monetarily, it's going to happen someday. And it did, thankfully, but yeah, it was definitely a bit of a gamble.
So you're definitely a cart before the horse guy.
There you go. Wow.
Boom. Look at
There's
this
your
guy.
90s,
Where are those
corny
sound
90s
effects?
guy joke right there. So.
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty awesome. I commend you for keeping them for that long and hanging on to them, because it does kind of give you the idea that's the greatest part of the Neo-Geo. It's like, well, when I finally get one, it's like I've got a whole arcade here because I've got 36 different games.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
yeah, I think that comes up. We could go down that path too, like talking about that, because I think that was something early on for me that, I love Neo-Geo, played a lot of it in the arcades locally and stuff as a kid, but it always made sense to me because I'm like, all right, I'm going to get an arcade machine. If I get an arcade machine, I'll have the ability to switch out games and I can play all these other games on that one arcade machine. Just a little bit short-sighted because I didn't understand the concept of multis or being able to just switch boards in and out. And, some of the multi-carts and stuff like that really hadn't been invented at that point. And so that it never crossed my mind that you'd be able to do all these different things with one machine. But yeah, like a Neo-Geo, you can play JAMA boards in it with an adapter, or if it's not a multi, like a 4-slot or a 6-slot, it is, they are JAMA wired, some of the machines, so you can just pop in other boards pretty easily. But that was all. I didn't know any of that back then, so to me, I was committed to the Neo-Geo because I liked it and I'd get like more bang for the buck out of it. But yeah, a lot of people don't realize. The options for playing multiple games in one machine, that can happen now. And as you mentioned, Steve, with the MiSTer Cade, it's just so easy now to do that kind of stuff. It's, even 5 years ago, probably not as prevalent. outside of like the Pandora's box and emulation and stuff.
Is this the revisionist history that you're telling yourself of your life? Oh, I'm going to need many cabs, for all the games. And it was only years later did I work out I could have just swapped the cards.
Could have just done one.
Oh, sorry. Now I've got this house full of cabs.
Speaking, I mean, how many cabinets do you currently own?
I was
right
almost afraid you were going to ask me that.
It might come up.
I think there's 21 in the basement right now. Yeah.
now? Goodness.
Yeah.
So does that become, as you move to your current establishment, however many years ago was that? I mean, is this a consideration? At some stage, this becomes a lifestyle choice, not just like, oh, I like having a couple of cabs. You got to consider these 20-something cabs.
Yeah, I got to tell you, so, we moved from the old place, I want to say 4 or 5 years ago, and at that point, I only had 4. I had the 2 candy cabs, I had Neo-Geo, and I had Virtua Fighter, and it was they were in a bonus room, and it was a townhouse that we were in. So when I found this house, it had been on the market, I think, like 9 months, and, obviously before, like pre-COVID. And when I went down into the basement, it's a completely unfinished space, and I'm looking at it like a blank canvas, and it's the whole length of the. I mean, my eyes are just like, yep, this is a selling point of the house. It's this bare basement with the concrete, floor, because my wife has no interest in doing anything down there. I'm like, this is all mine. I can do whatever I want down here. But. Yeah, I think a lot of people don't really. It's funny. I had a guy in looking at the HVAC system like 2 weeks ago, and just very unassuming. You come in the door, it's just like a normal house and everything, and then you go down to the basement. He's like, "Oh," he's like, "There's a lot of stuff. Oh, wow. Oh, I remember that one." And then he's like, he's distracted. And there was guys in here like 2 years ago. I forget what they were doing. Probably the water heater, I think. But they're like, "Hey." And I could just tell what was, that they wanted to ask. I was like, "You want to play Daytona before you go, don't you?" And he's like, "Yeah, can we?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'll turn it on."
That's right. These guys are used to coming in, maybe seeing some weird sex shit down in some guy's basement or something like that.
Yeah.
But this is way worse.
Yeah, right.
Is it going to be another dirty toilet this time?
Yeah.
No.
A sex swing? No.
Yeah.
It's just a Daytona.
Oh, goodness gracious.
A different type of twin fantasy.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Boom. Okay.
Man,
that's a good one.
Killing
That's a
it
good
today.
one. That's a good one. So did you have to do a lot of work were you a construction, did you know how to do home DIY and renovations beforehand, or was that totally, does your love of arcades then mean that you had to learn how to renovate the space for yourself?
Oh, so the space itself is still being worked on as of right now. It's not done. So it's unfortunate. Right before COVID, I had somebody in. I got a quote to have the basement done. I was ready to do it, and really nothing crazy. I just wanted like drywall up. I was closing off one end, so I had some unfinished space for storage, and then just like the sump pumps and stuff like that, like boxing that stuff in. Just real basic stuff, and it was relatively for what I wanted done and the size down there. It was a good quote. Well, then COVID hit, and then they're like, "Well, we're not coming out to do it just yet." I'm like, "All right." Well, a year goes by, right, and then drywall and all the lumber, all that stuff goes through the roof, and they would never even call me back. Like they're not going to honor the quote. And since that time, the quotes I've gotten to do the basement are $25,000 more. So I've just kind of been in a holding pattern at this point. I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna finish all the machines I have, straighten up down here. At some point, maybe we'll figure this out. But I'm not really great at that type of renovation. Like I'm not somebody that's good at that kind of stuff.
I hear you. I've just learned to put screws in the wall.
There you go.
I've got that little thing you put in first, and to tap it
anchor,
in.
The drywall anchor. Yeah.
Yes.
See?
Just learned that. I'm a genius. How are you, Steve? Are you good with the renovations?
I mean, I'm not like, I will ride things till there's like nothing left in them. I mean, I can't. I've been using like silicone and like what's it, 2-part epoxy to anytime like something springs a leak. It's like coat it. Oh, it'll be good. And it goes a couple more years. I can't. So you know how I had this dryer that would just constantly stop drying. Old dryer, and I don't like to go buy a new dryer. Who the hell wants to buy a new dryer? I found out there's just this little like thermostat or something in it, and what happens is the thermostats are replaceable, but they burn out real quickly. So anytime you put the thermostat in, it's a cheap knockoff. It would burn out after a couple of months. Well, I figured out if I just installed the thermostats and then stuck them outside the washing machine where it always stayed cold or dryer, they would never burn out again.
The dryer hack.
And I sold the dryer with the house, so
That's somebody else's problem.
somebody else has to deal with that crazy dryer now.
I can't believe you need a dryer, Steve. You got those beautiful purple 90s outfits. They don't need much
I just
drying.
go for a run, and it'll dry off. I was going to say, everything around me is like concrete walls or wood paneling, and it's a nail just straight through it. Like,
It's perfect. That's all you need. It is funny though, because like I'll get that like every now and then, like usually from my wife. It'll be some project or something here she'll want done. She'll be like, how is it that you can do goddamn Mortal Kombat in the basement and all those wires and you can't figure out how to hang a swing? And I'm like, well,
Electronics. Yes.
yeah, it's different. It's a different
there is.
mindset. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever done some thought or experiment to see how much power in your house been an issue or something like that for you, or know how much you're drawing?
Every now and then somebody will ask that question, and it's rare that like all like 20 machines or whatever would be on at the same time. It's usually at the most I have 2 up and running because it's usually just me. You know, and every now and then the neighbors will come over and I'll fire everything up, but at the most it's like, again, it's like probably 2-3 hours that they're over here and they're just playing Daytona for the most part. That's all anyone ever wants to play is just Daytona. But yeah, I don't really know because my electric bill has never been like sky high or through the roof, right? Because there's just not all on at the same time.
what? So with your collection now, are there still, other than, I mean, there's always going to be boards that I'm sure you're looking for and interested in, but I mean, like, how many more trophies are there?
What's the end game, right? Like,
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, is there still? I'm sure there's still something you're looking for, right? Is it, or is it that point where you're like, I think I've maybe maxed out? Or?
I think I'm pretty much. I mean, that warehouse closing was pretty much, it kind of helped me to come to the conclusion that maybe I need to be done too, because
It's a beautiful life story here.
yeah, right. It just all comes full circle. But no, I don't know. I mean, Time Traveler was one that I've always wanted, but I think the window on that has closed. I mean, that's an expensive game if you find it, and the game itself, it's not that good. So to buy it just to have it, I don't know. That would probably be the only thing I'd be interested in at this point. But again, something pops up like a baby Pac-Man, and it's like relatively cheap. I'm like, oh, okay, like, I don't know. At this point, I'm not really hunting for any, one cabinet. It's just more about if the right deal showed up.
But you must then, at some stage, you're running out of physical space. So yes, that's a good deal. So there's got to be some level of prioritization eventually. Oh, the baby Pac-Man's here, but I'm saving that in case I get a something else like that. Does that start to be a consideration now?
Yeah, my dad always asks for, because I was working on Terminator, which he loves. That's one of the few arcade machines that he would play. He'd be like, he's like, Joe, like you've got to be running. How much more room do you have down there for other stuff? There's a little bit of room, but it's not much, and I don't want it to look like junk. I want to have a little bit of space left. I still have my screen, my movie screen, and my projector from my old place that I want to have a dedicated spot for that in the one corner. So that's why I'm saying I'm pretty much done at this point. Like, 20's enough. Like nobody. I would like a pinball machine though, like that.
Yes.
That would.
That's kind of been what I've been having more fun with lately. Like, I don't know how. There's one show I go to every year that is in Nashville, and it kind of was birthed out of pinball more than anything else. And so they've always had this incredible pinball scene at this show where, like, Stern shows up with a half a dozen of the newest machines that are out, and they're all on free play, and you can just go there and play as long as you want. And it's some of those new machines, they're insane, and they're like $13,000.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
There was, for a while I wanted a Tron. I wanted a Tron legacy pinball machine, and one popped up locally. It is like $7,000, right? Well, now it's like twice that. So it's like it doesn't pay to wait, but at the time it's like, well, it's $7,000. Like that's way more than I've ever paid for an arcade machine. And it's just a tough pill to swallow.
Well, yeah, I've been looking locally because my kids will go. There's one arcade here, and I think they don't have as many machines as you. So I was gonna say maybe that's your future, is opening Joe's Arcade.
Just open the doors down there and charge by the hour.
And charge kids to go in your basement.
Hey guys, this arcade's in my basement.
Come
on. Yeah, all right.
Yeah, with your parents. Let's just be clear.
Sign this waiver.
I'm not having there's not just children in Joe's basement. Let's be clear about that.
Did you say you live in Florida? I've heard about the crazy shit going on. All right, going on there.
I'm actually in Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay, sorry.
But yeah. Let's distance myself a little bit.
You're a few states in between Florida. Oh goodness. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like, most people, once they get to a certain level of machines, they go and they have to do something else. A lot of guys I talked to who got larger collections ended up opening a shop, like a store, in a cheaper area of town where they could get a decent sized place. And they said that these guys told me it was less expensive for them to do that than to have their 50 machines in a storage area, because they were just paying storage.
Yeah, I can believe that. Yep.
So
I just have, like, like with some of the ones that I put some heart and soul into, like Virtua Racing, G.I. Joe, Mortal Kombat, now, like, where I've gone, like, basically, like, through the whole thing, new paint, new wiring, head to toe. Like, just putting that out and seeing the public, like, I would just, just
like a kid sit there with like a Capri Sun and knock it over on the control
play
panel.
Something else.
Just get your hand off my G.I. Joe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's just like a little bit of a attachment,
sentimental spot there for you.
Then factoring in, space, we grow a little older. Our collections start to grow. We start to question ourselves and wonder, what does this mean for us? This produces existential crises. But then MiSTer comes along. And it's not just, swapping out boards is one option, and then MiSTer comes along. And how has MiSTer, with its ability to just emulate perfectly, how has that changed your mindset of, I need everything? And is there some games where you said, look, it's expensive and I don't love it that much? There's some things that you're now satisfied internally to play on MiSTer because it's there. How has that changed your perspective on arcade collecting?
Yeah, I mean, I'll answer. I don't know if that was to me or Steve,
go for it.
or both of us. But most recent example for me was like In the Hunt, which is out for MiSTer now. You can play it. It's great. It's an expensive board. It's the team that did Metal Slug before they came. It's like that's right up my alley. It's something that I had my eye on, but I never pulled the trigger on getting that actual board. And even from an SNK fanboy perspective, I don't know if I need it. Like I can play it on Mr. Cade. I can, I actually had it running on the Astro City a couple nights ago. Had a good time. Why? Well, I don't need to go and drop, couple $100 on that board now. It's just not something that appeals to me for some of the cores that have been ported over. I mean that's a prime example, I think, because it is a board that I was interested in.
And a reasonable board. I mean, 200-300. You said. I mean, it's in shooting range of what.
Yeah, right. It's not. Yeah, it's not like 4 figures or anything like that. I know, a lot of people are looking at or waiting on CPS3 stuff. Third Strike, and because that has become so expensive. But that, I have a CPS3 board, but if I didn't, probably wouldn't be buying one.
Steve, how are you feeling about it? You got the system MiSTer in you, the big.
Well, we could talk about this too with Joe, because he apparently had been messing around with one of these too. The MiSTer's just so great, and like the idea, like the time I spent this last week messing around with the Retro Pi or the RGB Pi really just proved to me that there's a reason that the MiSTer's like, it literally is 2 or 3, 4 times, 10 times better in a lot of the ways that the things just run. I mean, it's like it's almost like night and day. So just the fact that you can get such a quick, great experience, plus the way the MiSTer's all set up, it's like almost on its own like thing. My MiSTercade now, I hardwired it with an Ethernet cable, and it's got like a, it's the perfect thing. The only thing that, of course, you don't get unless you have something. The harder thing with the MiSTercade is going outside of like the Neo-Geo MVS range almost. Then you got to think about, okay, what kind of stick do I want to use to add something that has a different button arrangement than the 4 buttons? There's a lot of games that you start looking at, wanting to play, and then you're like, what do I do about the screen flip, right? Because you can't, then you're limiting yourself in that. So what's your solution there? Do you have obviously multiple machines maybe with a vertical only setup like Bob kind of?
I don't have a vertical setup right now. I know. I don't have it. So there is a machine that's down there right now that I don't really have a purpose for it. It just was cheap, and I was at the auction house, and I was just like, $100. I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll take it. And it's just it basically looks like a Midway cabinet. I thought it was when I saw it online, but I think it's a Semco. I think I actually had never. I didn't really know what that was until I picked up this machine, but it basically could be anything. It's just a generic setup, and so I thought about that actually, putting a MiSTercade in there and then using it for a dedicated vertical setup, because you're right, there's a lot of games that you just can't, where I can't play because all my screens are horizontal.
And there's CRTs, right?
Yeah.
I mean, is every one of yours is a CRT?
Except for the Vuelix, which obviously is LCD. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, that's when I went into the like the local arcade, and it's like almost heartbreaking because I think almost 2/3 of those machines have all been swapped over to LCDs. But and then for some reason a lot of them have like weird control panel, like the way that some of them have added like a different joystick, right, in the restoration process, and it's not good, or it's not like a good solution on some of the games.
Yeah.
And it's heartbreaking to me because I see that they have like 1/3 of machines on CRTs, and all their CRTs are looking pretty jank, bad, like problems. And I try to go talk to the bartender, and he's like, "Oh, you got to come back during the daytime, you know." Like, who's this weirdo trying to talk to me?
Why is he trying to order knockoff Dr. Pepper and whiskey? I don't know. This drunk needs to go home.
Go home. Go to that place across the street tomorrow. That's what he literally told me.
Okay.
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, I get from a business standpoint, I kind of get it. Like, but it also, I don't know. Like for me, I'm with you. Like when I wander in somewhere, if I'm traveling and I start looking at the machines, like I'm a little judgmental. Like, I'm like, yeah, what is that? Like, you guys couldn't be bothered to replace the marquee light in that? You guys couldn't, like these buttons suck. What are they, like $250? Like, come on, like do better. Like I get so judgmental about it when I wander through. Not to mention like crossing into the territory you did when, they rip out a CRT and put an LCD, which I mean, I'm assuming is just maintenance or hopefully not ignorance, but I'm assuming it's just the fact that they don't want to deal with it anymore.
Yeah, that's what I feel like. There's a smaller place in town that had a Mortal Kombat 1 machine, and that guy actually hired me to go in and rebuild it. The actual monitor, CRT. So I was happy to keep that one in there. But speaking of Mortal Kombat, I saw some cool things you've been working on recently on Twitter. With your Mortal Kombat machine. Would you like to talk about that, Annie? That seemed pretty interesting.
Yeah, I'm happy to. You guys can feel free to jump in or ask questions, or so I'm just not the only one sitting here talking. But yeah, that's another warehouse find. Last summer, I think I got the cabinet for $300 or $350. It was a Beastorizer, which is Bloody Roar on PlayStation, but it had a Beastorizer board in it. It was sold at, there it is. Wait, hold that up for everybody, please. Dr. Wham.
Dr. Wham.
He had said it came out in 1927.
George Michael get some royalties off that?
It's crazy delicious. The original formula.
Wow.
Sounds like something George Michael would say in a back alley or something.
Sorry to interrupt you, Joe.
No, you're not at all.
It's
very distracting. I hope that you bring that with you the next time we're at Retro World. So yeah, it was a Beastorizer cabinet, which it was Bloody Roar. I think I just said, and it was sold as non-working. I pulled the board out of it, and Beastorizer fires up. So that's cool. So right away, I'm like, all right, I'm ahead here. I got a working board. I don't know what that sells for. I never bothered to look it up, but it's like, okay, I got another game in the collection. And the downside was the cabinet had a lot of mold on it. It was growing mold. And it was frustrating because like I bought it at auction, so I had to take it and paid for it already. So I had to haul it out of there. And there was a War Final Assault there too. And he's like, I'll give you that for $300 if you want it. And it looked like it was in good shape until I looked in the back of it. Same thing. It was white. Like the inside looked like it had snowed. And I was just like, I just can't. Like it's just so much work. And I'm I don't even know if it works. So anyways, I brought Beastorizer home, and then I had to like tear it apart that night. And so I had a very small baby at the time. My wife wasn't very pleased. That one that I left on this road trip came home with another arcade machine. I'm like, I can't even come inside or bring this, since I'm gonna have to be outside all night. Like I got to strip the whole thing down. So
because it's full of fungus, right? Because it's like
you can't bring it in the house.
Last of Us prop at this stage with so much fungus on it.
Yeah, you can't bring that in. So I stripped the whole thing out and sanitized it, sanded, mold treatment, all that kind of stuff. Stripped it, then started the whole process of repainting it. Put laminate on the sides. They were a little funky, but that like kind of helps to not only hold it all together and keep it from peeling, but then gives you a nice smooth surface for putting new artwork on too, which I've become a fan of doing that. So yeah, now it's I would say it's the only thing it's missing right now are locks. I didn't have locks for the coin doors. I'm waiting on those. But yeah, everything I built everything from the ground up on this. It's got a new power block, which I really hadn't had to do before. But yeah, just because everything was in such disarray and so gross. It was really just the bare wooden cabinet at one point, and then some of that stuff I just tossed it, unfortunately, because it was either rusted or covered in mold. Even the wires, the original control panel, peeling the plexi off of the top, and it was just the stuff that was falling out of it. So, but yeah, it's all done now. It looks pretty good. New artwork, new control panel, new buttons, sticks, and on the inside, I bought a switcher from Riddled TV. So it plays Mortal Kombat, Mortal Kombat 2, Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, I've got War Gods and WrestleMania because they all use the same control layout. That 5.
I was going to say.
Yeah, like on a die. So they all use that same layout. So it seemed perfect to put those other boards in there. I don't have Mortal Kombat 4, but at some point maybe that'll happen. But yeah, it's pretty cool. It was something that it just felt like it was where because people would come over and be like, "Don't you have Mortal Kombat?" It's like they're like,
yeah.
or don't you have Pac-Man? Like that's always it's Pac-Man, Mortal Kombat, Galaga. That's the same stuff people are always asking whenever they go down there. So now I can say, yes, there's Mortal Kombat. Go shut up. Go play whatever one you want.
Go get your ass kicked by the computer in Mortal Kombat.
Yeah.
Relive your days of losing your quarters to Mortal Kombat.
Exactly.
So it happened that this wooden cab that you got happened to have that 5-button arrangement. That was sort of just a nice coincidence.
Or did you redo it?
Oh, I redid it. So
you redid it, so you put your paddle in.
It was originally a Mortal Kombat 2 cabinet. The original control panel was still on it, but it had been butchered and chopped up and made for. I don't even remember what the button layout looked like for. I tossed it. It was so gross, like as far as the mold and soda and stickiness underneath the. Yeah, it was definitely a cheap cabinet. Thankfully, the monitor worked in it, which was huge. Now it wasn't great. I had to replace a lot of parts on the chassis, and Steve, you actually inadvertently helped me because I was watching your Rejuvenator video that you had that you had done, and I was like, man, I need that. Because at this point I've got like 20 some machines in the basement, right? So I've got all these CRTs I got to take care of, and the monitor had like banding down the one side, and it really pissed me off because I put so much work into this machine, and then I'm looking at the monitor, which is a thing that it means maybe the most because it's a screen you're staring at when you're playing the game, and it had these bands down the side, and a recap on the chassis, didn't solve it. There's also some waviness in the screen, which I ended up, thankfully, that got solved too. But I put the Rejuvenator on it, and that got rid of the banding, and I was very impressed.
Really?
I was very impressed by that. I mean, I didn't know that was a thing. I just did it because the green gun on it looked like it was a little funky too when I did looked the measurements. But the Rejuvenator. Rejuvenating that tube eliminated the banding, and I didn't know.
That's crazy. I've not really heard that, but how those. I mean, the filaments in there get so much built up on them. If it successfully cleans that, I mean, it could. Apparently, that had enough built up on it where it was doing a lot of bad. Did you get that same model? Or did you get a different one?
Is it a 467? Is that what it is? Is that what? Yeah. I think that's what I have.
How did you build? Here's what I didn't do. I didn't build a regular. You could build, which I'm going to need to do soon. You could build a universal cap.
Oh,
so you can plug on to the individual prongs on the back of the tube, and hook it up to any set. Because for a while there, I was trying to make individual adapters, and that's difficult.
Yeah, Arcade Buffet, right? That's who I think built. He built a CR23. Is that what it is?
Yeah, there is.
I think that's what
on
I used.
eBay or
no, I just contacted him directly.
Oh, okay.
And he built one for me. But he's like, "Do you want the universal thing?" And I was like, probably, but right now, just send me that CRT20. I'm not.
I need to get that contact because I don't want to build it. I'll need to get that contact.
Well, see, that's why
I didn't know. I didn't know there was somebody that was actually selling universal adapters.
Yeah, he said, because I asked him for what was it, 23 and a 31, and he's like, "Do you want the universal?" He's like, "I can do a universal." But then you obviously you got to look at the pinout, and then you have the different. And I'm like, I just got to go. Like, I have too much. I just send me the 23 right for now because I need to plug that thing on and just do it. Otherwise, I'll be screwing around looking up pinout. I just need to go. And I have so many K7000s in the basement and tubes that match that I think I went through and did inventory, and like I want to say like 15 or 16 of them would take that CR23 or CR30. So I'm like, just that's all I need for now.
So on your new 5-way machine now, you said you completely redid it, and like, what about because I often wonder about this about my machine, just like going in and ripping it out and rewiring it.
Yep.
And just because I think when you first like start getting into arcade stuff, you look in the back of an arcade machine and it's just like, what the hell's going on back there?
Yep.
But then after a while of dealing with this, you realize what's going on. And you're like, well, if I rebuilt this machine, I would do the wiring this way.
Yeah.
Did you like do all this according to like a plan you had been kind of devising, or was it more just like, I'm just going and like there's wires?
Yeah, I mean, it was more along the lines of like I had to rip it all out because I just had to go, and it's like I'm gonna have to figure this out, because kind of like what you're saying, in the past I've always tried to reuse whatever I can from original parts, including like even the G.I. Joe. When I redid that, I was still able to reuse. I swapped out the power supply, like the actual switcher, like switching power supply. That it got a new one of those, but like the EMI filter and the isolation transformer and the plug, all that stuff is still original. And you just take it out, you clean everything, you sand it, and then you kind of just set it back and you put the wires back, and it's really not too difficult if you take a lot of pictures and you make sure that you're paying attention to what you're doing. But that wasn't going to be the case for this, and I knew that right away. And that's kind of been a fun thing I think about the journey and working with the arcade machines and collecting them, is that it seems like every year or so I add one more thing to like the repertoire that I'm able to do, and it's kind of fun, like growing like that. I mean, like I just talked about Tube Rejuvenator. Like I didn't have one of those prior to 2023, and I'm watching your video, I'm watching Delusional Arcades, and seeing you guys use them. I'm like, okay, like I can do that. And I got it. I got the cap kit. I replaced some of the resistors in it before I used it, right? I had to reflow the solder. And then I'm like, okay, well, let's figure it out. Let's do it. And it solved that banding problem for me. And so like that's added to the repertoire now. Like I feel comfortable doing that. Monitors, I didn't really want to work on them when I first started. When I first bought the Neo-Geo, I didn't want to work on monitors. Now I feel a little bit more comfortable. You just read a little bit more, you get your hands dirty. Maybe you break a few things, but you also solve a lot of problems too. And it's costly to send stuff out. You find that out quick too. Boxing things up, just postage alone and time and waiting for people to fix things. And then, you got another bill on your hands, and that, $300 machine you bought suddenly starts becoming $600, $700, $800, depending on, if you can't do the work yourself, it does start to add up. Yeah, that's absolutely true. That goes the way with a lot of CRT stuff now. It's all you can do to try to keep them going on your own, because even I quote people all the time, and I know half of them are like, oh my gosh, she's crazy. But
yeah, sure.
At the same time, it's like, hey, I'm meticulously, when you do this stuff, you do want to do it right, and you're always learning new stuff. I think that's one of the cool things about an arcade, is it's more of like, you've got so much going on there, right? Like you've got obviously monitor issues that you could have, and you're going to be dealing with CRT. You got a different power supply. The funny thing is you could, like you said, run through machines that have isolation transformers that look like something out that should never work, right? Yep. It looks like a rusted anchor over in the corner, and you're like, what the heck is that thing?
Yeah.
But it still performs fine. And but you like you say, you're learning so much about that. There's so much wiring in it. It's almost like a vehicle or something. You're not learning just one specific thing. And then, like you say, you could even go expand that and start talking about board work, which can be infinitely just complicated.
Yep. So to answer that original question, I don't know that there was really a plan other than get this shit out of here, clean the mold out, and then I'll figure it out because I'm gonna have to. There's no other choice, and I did. So then I kind of ripped through. I built the power block for this, and then I just did like 3 more of them because I knew there's other projects down there. So I just knocked them all out at once like that, and yeah. So at some point this summer, like Open Ice and the NBA Jam that I'm working on, hopefully this side, I started it. But that's actually what happened is I was working on that and I had to stop because Mortal Kombat came in and it was full of mold, and I had to like switch. So,
do you give some thought to when you start stripping down a machine? There's mold and there's everything and all the things. And you say with Mortal Kombat, you've basically kept the wood exterior, even some of that got chucked, and the CRT. So at least the CRT, I guess. Is there some stage where you're ripping apart a cabinet, or you could happen, and you think like, well, if I just replace everything, is this what's authentic, or should have I? It's like the old idea: if I take a ship and I rebuild every part of that ship, is it the same ship anymore? Have you ever, like, I don't have an answer for this because I can totally imagine. I would much still prefer to take even the wood shell of an authentic cabinet and say, like, well, all I took was the wood shell rather than just getting a new wood shell. What's the friggin' difference there? Nothing really at that stage.
Right.
But somehow original still OG. At what stage does it not be a restoration, and is it a complete new thing? How do you feel about how much to rip it apart?
Yeah, it's such I mean, it's a good question. Like that's that very philosophical question has run through my mind multiple times. Yeah, at what point does it cease to be original? For me, like there's really like 3 things. This is just a personal take. It's, I think it's the monitor. Like I want a CRT. I want the original wooden framework of the cabinet, and I want an original board in it. If I have those 3 things, I feel pretty good. Like obviously everything else is gravy. Like if you can save the original side art, if you can save, that the original marquee isn't yellowed and it doesn't look like complete trash and is cracked, and if you can save, the more you can save, the better. But those 3 things are things that I want, and I feel like for the most part, those are salvageable. You can get another monitor if you need to. Another tube. You could get a new chassis or get the one you have rebuilt. The cabinet itself, it's funny because even that becomes a question, like how much additional wood have you added to that cabinet? Like at this point you should have just bought a new one, you dummy. Like, but yeah, it's tough. There's a company in Chicago, Prince Arcades, and I don't know if you guys are ever heard of them or familiar with them. They do a lot of stuff outside Chicago. They've got an actual arcade. Then they do reproduction cabinets, and they look great. They look awesome. At one point there was a Space Ace board set that was being sold locally, and I was like, oh man, I could get that, and then I could get a reproduction cabinet from Prince Arcade. But then, like, kind of the question that you just brought up, Lewis, it's like, well, is that really in the spirit of what I like? At that point, I could probably get the monitor, and I could probably have the original board set and stuff running, but then the cabinet itself is just kind of, it's not really a piece of history at that point. It's really more just, and that's a very personal thing. Like everybody's opinion's gonna vary on that. But I stopped myself because I felt like, 1, it's another project I don't need, but 2, it isn't. It's just not in the spirit of how I do things. And I would need to find some, beat up, moldy Space Ace cabinet to save. Like that would be more fun to me.
I would imagine it is similar to a car guy who maybe just wants the shell. Yeah, maybe some of those guys just take it down to the shell. If it's an authentic shell, even if they've got to do a little body work to it and patch stuff up, if it was basically the shell, even if they get a classic car and then in the middle it's a new electric drivetrain or something like that, fancy, that it's still some element of it was the original. But this company that you said that produces the reproduction, so they do a full Will they do a full, like, with marquees and laminate and stickers and all of that, or just
think
that?
so. I think so. I think I've seen them sell, like, on Facebook and on Marketplace. I think I've seen them redo, like, everything like that. But they also do sell just the shells. Yeah. I at one point, like, my Terminator 2 was so bad that at one point I was like, oh, I should just rebuild this at this point. I don't know that I ever actually found the plans, nor am I good at woodworking. So in the end, I ended up saving it, and nobody would be the wiser at this point. But that was a ton of work to get just the body of the Terminator 2 into a salvageable state structurally, and then put it all back together. But yeah, they do full rebuilds as well as shells and parts.
What's your just before we kind of go on, still talking about the Mortal Kombat machine. So I'm also interested in sticks and buttons, and is it just I'm going to put a Sanwa in, or are you giving thought to how the original button was? I do some concave or a different style of button or different style of joystick. Are you giving thought to this as well when you rebuild it?
So for me at this point, almost every American cabinet, I think, has an IL in it, an IL stick. That's just my go-to. That's what I like. Yeah, Industrious Lorenzo. It's pretty much what I think Steve and I here, at least in America, probably played with back in the day. Hap. Let me see if I can get this right. So I think Hap used to license from them, and they would produce the sticks and buttons for Hap back in the day. And more recently, I don't know, in the last 5 years or so, maybe more, Hap contracted that out to a company in Mexico. And so the Hap stuff today is not the same as what you played on back in the day, even though they both say Hap on them. But IL is who Hap used to contract with. So I just, all the stuff I get is just IL, the sticks, the buttons. For all my American cabinets, that's what I use. Even the Hap sticks, it's probably 95-98%. Like if the same, like if most people wouldn't tell the difference between them, but it's negligible in price. So I just buy the ILs. Japanese machines, like the Astro City, the Blast City, I do have Seimitsu sticks, buttons. I know a lot of people like Sanwa. I've kind of learned that I really like the tighter feel on some of the Seimitsu sticks, and even the buttons are not quite as mushy, and I like that. So
I feel that with the Sanwa, that little bit of movement in the middle, and everyone who uses Sanwa says, yeah, that's normal. And trying to find that Sanwa that doesn't move very much. Then it feels, when it doesn't move, then it feels great. But if it's a little bit loosey-goosey, which is also part of it. When I was just in Tokyo earlier this year playing some Dodonpachi, and you walk up to this amazing Japanese arcade, row after row. I mean, it's only half of what Joe has, but nevertheless, it's still a decent arcade. And sitting down to this authentic experience, and you feel the stick, and you're like, oh, wait. Da-da-da-da. But you're like, wait, well, this is it. How can I not say this is authentic? So,
yeah.
What have you, Steve? What have you got in the Big Red? Is it still? Did you have to replace the buttons?
No, I didn't. I have replaced the buttons. Some of them. Shoot, I've got a bag of buttons here. Let me check what they are.
His bag of buttons. So he's got some.
A bag.
Okay, they're the original ones, are they? That you replaced?
No, these are the only things I've replaced are the switches, the micro switches, whatever. I can't remember.
Okay.
But that's it. I mean, no, it's got all original, everything else. Whatever normally comes on the machine. The one I bought, I've told this before. It was a guy who was a crazy collector, and he had two arcades that he had opened up, and the one he bought these machines for the games in them, like the MVS carts to fill in his collection. And he's like, I've got a dozen of these machines. I don't need it. Come and get it. But he had an empty warehouse. But it wasn't empty. It was filled with just, I've still never seen some of the games that he had in there that were just collecting dust, like ever out somewhere. Like these crazy, the one I remember was they had this huge Star Trek thing. like a sit down Star Trek game.
Yep.
Cool.
And there were a couple other machines. He's like, those are like basically priceless.
I want to say Time Runner on Twitter is working on a Star Trek. The very one you just mentioned. I think
Really?
he just got that like a week or two ago.
Wow. Yeah, it just sits, you sit there and you see stuff. You're like, what? There was an arcade like that? And it's so, yeah, but it was all original and most of it was good except for those switches. Eventually, they only have so many clicks in them.
Yeah.
A couple thousand.
I saved my original sticks off the Neo-Geo as well, and I rebuilt them maybe 2 years ago, and then I put them on, and I was like, wow, I'm so used to playing with the ILs now. I don't like it, and I took them off, and you know what? It's my machine, and I'll do that. I don't care. But yeah, it's not original in that sense that they're not the original sticks, but I do like the ILs. I also cheated, and I put the convex buttons on the Neo Geo. I just like the way that feels better. Mm-hmm.
Really?
Yeah.
Wait, so that's the
you
ones
are
that
crazy.
go
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had to think concave, convex.
I know, I
back
get
to high
confused by
school.
it too sometimes. Yeah, I was hoping I was saying it right. But yeah, most of the machines, even like the Big Blue, like I kept the concave buttons on that, and just because that's it's what we always played on back in the day here, and it still feels okay. But I'll tell you, you go to convex, it's so much better. It's just so much better. I don't know why we went the concave route here in the States, but it's just so. I don't think I'll ever go back on the Neo Geo, but people notice that too, which is funny. Like even like the neighbors or people, friends will come over and they'll notice that the buttons are not. They don't have the the concave like they remember.
That's interesting. Sorry, go ahead. Say.
No, I was going to say. So, is there? You've obviously got a lot of games. Is there any are you really great at any single arcade game or like a fighting game?
Play these machines. What
I am.
controversy.
So this is funny because this comes up. This comes up a lot too. So, back when I was in high school, I played hockey. I love hockey, right? And I struggled to be average at it, but I loved to play it. It's the same thing with games with me. And I'll just admit that. I'm not phenomenal at any well, I mean, there's a few games I'm pretty I'll beat the neighbors and most of my friends come over here I'll win those games. If we go to Retro World and play real that crew that was there, those guys are playing King of Fighters. I'm no, I'm not getting my ass beat in front of everybody right now.
That's what I was gonna say. I went to New York and saw them, and it was just like a bloodbath. I was like, this is fun. I'll just watch everybody. They're like, Steve, play something.
Yeah, so I would say I'm probably pretty average at most games. Nothing special. Like Third Strike. I like to play it, but I am nowhere near the caliber of things I see online, or I'm just not. So I always give my sports analogy. I love playing hockey, and I wasn't good at it.
That's tough because if you got these dudes who are playing Third Strike, they've been playing it how long was it? 20 years? How many? I know it's not 20 anyway. They've been playing it for a long time. So it's the same thing even on PC when you come to Quake Live or how Quake 3 Arena or something like that. Those original online multiplayer you want to play, but anyone who's still playing that is a crazy person who's been playing it for the last 15, 20 years.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a real hard entry point sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's the way when I went to New York, it was like, oh, well, I just got back from this getting 5th place in the United States at that game, and then this other guy's like, I'm 2nd in the world at this game, and it's like, and then I'm like, okay, cool. And I try to get good enough at King of Fighters that I'll, maybe can play a couple times. But the bad thing is if I would win, like if I try to play on Big Red and I go through and even put the computer on easy and sit there and play, after like 8 matches, my forearms are like, I'm like, I need to go to the gym because my forearms are like doing this, like just throbbing. Like, how do they even do? How do you have the dexterity to play?
That's the
that
thing I've noticed lately
over
too.
and over again.
Yeah, just I don't have the dexterity in my fingers. I've noticed that's starting to slip a little bit. So yeah, fighting games definitely out for me. I do feel like I'm pretty decent at Blitz, Showtime, NBA Jam, and a lot of the midway sports titles. I feel like I'm pretty good at those. But outside, you take me outside of that, and it's like a 50-50 shot.
Something like NBA Jam. I played that back in the day. That was, I remember that, the 4-player, that I remember that hitting arcades, and it was just a phenomenon. It was, for many people, you've got one, and it's very close to a lot of, from our generation, close to our hearts, because it was really, The Simpsons, I remember that when that came in, 4 players, wow, it was huge. The Simpsons was only in the first season or something, so this was a phenomenon. NBA Jam was another one of those. But is NBA Jam maybe different to play because it was there's a co-op aspect, and is there a competitive NBA Jam? It's not like Third Strike where there's these absolute autistic nutters, and I mean that with respect to all of them in the fighting game community, because there's a different community around NBA Jam, these more casual games.
Yeah, I don't know that there's I don't know. I've seen tournaments for it, obviously. Like I've been at conventions and stuff where I see them do round robin and tournaments, but I don't know that there's a I don't know if you do you, Steve, if anybody plays that
interesting
hard?
I've never
I feel like it'd be looked down on, honestly. I feel like by the hardcore nerds would look down on NBA Jam. Like, that rubber band coating, like,
right.
It's like... For sure, there's some MVG video coming out where he's removed the rubber banding or something. He hacked into it. Yeah.
But
that's an interesting point, though, Lewis. You bring up that there's these hardcore followings for things, some of these arcade games, to the point where there's whole competitive scenes, and then other games are still considered great, but there's no like competitive following for them.
But even like in the fighting game community, there's like weird things that are like on the outs. Like was that last year? I think I did that video on Killer Instinct. I got the Killer Instinct board. I got it relatively cheap. It didn't have a hard drive, and all I had to do, I burned a new chip for it that allows it to use any hard drive. Right, that's out there. You can get that, and then I wrote a compact flash card for it, or a flash memory module. I can't remember at this point, but it worked, right? And I was just like, yeah, this was cool because I got it. Because Killer Instinct's like $1,000. Like if you go out and try to buy that, even on a forum, it's like $1,000 right now. But I remember I got like comments from people that were like, "Oh, nice job picking up a game that no one plays competitively anymore." And I'm like, "What? Like I just bought it because I like I got it because I like it. I wanted to play it, and I like playing it." But yeah, the fighting game community, and I've went out and I was reading about like they kind of turned their backs to it. And again, there's reasons for that, like as far as like. Technicalities on different strengths of fight and the imbalanced like character. I don't know, but these people know, and they don't want to play it competitively anymore. But it's interesting. Like even within the genre, there's games that are on the outs that were once popular.
Sure, as time evolves, and I think also a little bit. The scene. Well, maybe the scene goes up and down. I was trying to think through fighting games here, because there was the lull after Third Strike, and then Street Fighter 4 eventually brought fighting games back, kind of again into sort of a modern renaissance of what we're experiencing now. We're about to get Street Fighter 6, so maybe because it is a bit. It's different. It's a different fighting game, let's say, and maybe that's what brought Street Fighter 4 back. That we needed a bit of time. We needed to chill out on that. We'd had too much. I remember those days. I was like, Alpha, what, the 3?
Yeah,
I don't know. I talk to girls now. What is this?
It's an interesting thought, too, that how is there not value in the IP of Killer Instinct where some company doesn't have a desire to say, well, we want to be in the fighting game marketplace in the next year. What's something we do? We come up with a new game, or we can go and just like pull this old IP somehow and negotiate a deal to bring back a Killer Instinct. I don't know. It's just it's also it's all around. It's a little bit surprising that there's no that in kind of video games. There's a lot of IP that obviously is like protected. Like we were talking about a week or two ago, Nintendo. You know, a lot of their IP is highly coveted by them, and protected. But when you get to like arcade stuff, and even some other independent created games, a lot of that can be like more wild west. Maybe it's the fact that some of these IPs, nobody knows everybody involved in them. I don't know, and attorneys don't want to let big companies touch that kind of stuff. But
yeah. I mean, I don't even know who owns Killer Instinct's rights at this point. I don't know if that's, Midway folded. I don't know who bought them or who owned, and then Nintendo, I don't know if they have a piece in that too. There was a Killer Instinct game a few years ago, right? Maybe more than a few.
Yeah, there was. It was because I thought you could get it on
Steam.
It was something, or it was like an Xbox thing or something, or it was maybe it was like partially free. I can't remember.
Well, that's never good.
It was something a few years ago.
Joe, when you're getting I've watched a few of your videos where you're getting the decals and the imagery redone. You were saying if you put a bit of laminate down, then it's easy to put that. So you're re-putting decals, you're putting this information back on there. And has there ever been issues for you to get that made? Because I had this story that I was saying to Steve a while ago. I found all these old Dodonpachi files on the internet, posters. And I just got my designer to blow them up and do the best they could. And I sent them off to my local print house. We get posters made all the time. And they printed them off for me. And Steve was commenting that maybe in the United States of Freedom, there are some print shops that would look at your order and say, well, that's copyrighted material, or clearly looks copyrighted. I ain't touching this. Has that ever become a factor for you when you're getting this made from companies?
I've never had an issue with that, because most of the places I get it from, they're offering that as one of their products. So I'm not actually giving them the images. They've done the work already. So a lot of these guys, like Sabo's Arcades, that's a really good place. He's entered into the arcade 1-up space. So since that has happened, he's been flooded, I assume, with orders, and there's a huge backlog anytime you order. But his stuff is top notch. He really good material. But that's one of the things that he does is they'll scan original cabinets and then vectorize it and all that kind of stuff to make it sharp and high quality prints, and they'll offer that stuff. So usually you have to wait. I know some guys wait until somebody scans a cabinet if it's something that you want to do that the art's just not available for, or high resolution images of it aren't available for. You have to wait for one of these guys to do that. XL Arcade is another one. They do a lot of Midway stuff. He's actually put up some more obscure things recently that he has cabinets for that, and he says he's got a bunch of them that he's going to be working. He did Radical Bikers, which I saw for the first time in a long time at Too Many Games last summer and was able to play it. But he has the artwork up for that now. So that's kind of where I get the art. You kind of go out and look and see who's done work and who's perfected this and is doing high quality prints. It's not something that I'm pulling myself and sending off. There are places that will do that. Game On Graphics will do that if you send them files for like marquees and control panels. But as far as full side art stuff, you really need somebody that's scanned that. And there's drama around that sometimes because they'll steal from each other artwork, and then they'll bicker about it online. Who took what from who? I think XL Arcade actually had I don't know if it was a mistake or I think it was the NBA Jam Tournament edition that he mocked up, which looked like the original cabinet, but it wasn't a scan. And later on, he recognized that some of the differences, and he got a cabinet and was able to do the scan, and he has the full scan up now. But somebody else was selling the side art, and it was his because he's the only one who did it. He did the original, and so that became a big thing, you know, as drama unfolds on the internet. And so that happens from time to time, the different vendors stealing graphics from each other or buying it from one another and then scanning it themselves. But to answer your question, no, I've not run into that, but I could see that being an issue, especially if you took it somewhere like a Kinko's, or they seem to be very fascist about things at times when you're trying to get something made there.
You want to find your more independent
I think we were laughing because you could go and get it was like a cake. It was like a cake thing. Like the kids would want something on their birthday cake, and they're like, "Oh, you can't do that. That's copyrighted. Like you can't have we can't make you a Mickey Mouse cake. We can make you a Marky the Rat cake." If you want to come check out Marky the Rat, you can.
Soon you can make Steamboat Willie, because that Steamboat Willie's going in. So every kids are getting Steamboat Willie cakes for Christmas. I was
random second. I was watching some stupid video on YouTube where this guy was complaining about how the public domain is a terrible thing, and now that Steamboat Willie's in the public domain, he was going through how Disney's still going to fight to keep the trademark, you know, to go after people for Steamboat Willie and how awful. And I was like, this guy's an ass. Who sits around shitting on the public domain? It's like,
however,
Sonny Bono's love child. Secret love child.
There is a point though with him
that man.
Okay, so public domain is good, but I think a lot of people are watching this Steamboat Willie theme because it's going into the public domain, and it's going to set a precedent because like how you should be able to do it, but will Disney come up with some clever way to work around that or still use some tactics? Yeah, will someone pop up straight away with, I don't know, merch or T-shirts or somehow monetizing the Steamboat Willie version of Mickey, and will Disney use some method to put the heavy on them to do that? It has implications for copyright, because I was wondering about, yes, we're selling an NBA Jam marquee, for example, but does NBA come back? Does Midway, if they're a thing, come back? That legality of reproducing their logo. Have you experienced that or seen that anywhere, Joe?
I've not. I've thought about that a number of times, like looking at one of the examples of the rarer, not super rare, but like XL Arcade just put up Metamorphic Force, and that's something that you don't see very often, and that's pretty cool. But what are the chances that, you know, like Konami is going to come back? And it seems kind of slim. Like the threat's there, but maybe they don't really give a shit about like chasing down this guy that's printing off 2 of these a year for somebody, right? Sure. But what you just said has often popped into my head, like NBA, like that NBA logo is on there. There are team logos on some of the graphics, and they seem like they might be a little bit more nasty to deal with, and that's a popular game too. Like, I mean, people are still buying that, I would assume. I mean, I don't know how many he sells. I don't know what that looks like, but I have to think he sells more NBA Jams than he does Metamorphic Forces. And you know, NFL, like Blitz, like that's another big property with, you know, big pockets and attorneys. Like I would be concerned about that kind of stuff myself, but I don't know that XL Arcade or Sabos, I mean, I can't speak for them, but they're still selling it. So I guess, or maybe it's such a niche thing that it's not on anyone's radar.
It's a weird thing, because I still think it's kind of a gray area that, like you said, all it takes is a attorney to get the idea to go after, and we'll see something like we saw. I mean, it's not exactly the same, but you see something like you see in the Bowser thing we talked about with the hacker, who they're like, well, we want to send a message that we don't want people just printing and selling hundreds and hundreds of copies of our logo and to put on machines. And so without our consent. And so, but there still is a lot of that kind of Wild West what are you buying in the arcade scene a little bit anyway, because it's so flooded with these multicade things that half of them are probably loaded with, let's be honest, pirated software. And so I feel like there's still this whole element of, will anybody ever care to come and
well, if it gets outlawed in America, the Chinese, you'll just be able to order it from AliExpress. They've probably already scanned it.
They probably don't care.
Well, Nintendo's another one. I mean, you just mentioned that yourself, and you can buy Donkey Kong art everywhere. And I always wonder about that. I mean, Nintendo has been notoriously, picky and just petty in some cases with some of that stuff. But I'd be very interested to hear if any of those places have ever heard from. I mean, I have to assume you just take it down. Like, they're not going to fight Nintendo or the NFL or NBA.
Yeah.
Well,
speaking of the NBA, before Lewis,
go ahead. No, go Steve.
You playoffs are going on now.
Yeah.
Are you? I saw maybe you posting. You Sixers fan?
Yeah.
The only team not playing?
Yeah. Hey, we've got to sweep.
I know.
I mean, you don't need to play when you sweep.
I thought maybe tonight, right before this, I was watching the crazy ending of the Boston game.
Well, who won that?
Did you say that? The Atlanta won at the end.
Oh, good.
Trae Young hit a 3-pointer with half a second to go.
Good. Like, drag that series out.
From he hit it from 5 feet past the half court.
Yeah.
So anyway, American basketball.
No, it's good. Good, get into it.
The funny thing about that game was, here's another good example of American pirate. I have these websites that just stream these games. I don't pay for sports. Like, there's a website you just go to and it's streaming. It pulls a bunch of pop-ups.
Now the attorneys are coming after the Cathode Ray podcast.
They've been watching for an hour and a half. So that's what I was watching it on, and right before, just in a browser here. But that's how I watch my sports now, is just through a browser, because I'm so cheap. I don't want to pay.
I do that for the NFL stuff. It's easy to find the games that way. And
what about the NFL? I'm interested to see what happens this year, because they've switched. Stupid conversation. Here we go. Poor Lewis.
Well, we're coming to the end anyway, so
they have a thing where you could buy, if you're a rich guy like my father-in-law, he's obsessed with the NFL Sunday ticket thing, which was an exclusive deal with this old satellite TV company in the United States. They had an exclusive deal for I don't know, it's been 20 years.
It's DirecTV, right? Like, you can only get it through them.
But now it's switched over where it's only on YouTube now. This upcoming season, it's only on YouTube. You can only buy it through. Well, it's actually, I think, a little cheaper. But the crazy thing is, what is my 75-year-old? How is my 75-year-old father-in-law, who's pissed off just changing the DirecTV remote between the 5 games, gonna figure out the damn YouTube?
Load YouTube up on your Fire Stick and then find the game. Oh man. Yeah.
So
you're gonna have to go over.
It's
there,
gonna be
Steve,
an interesting.
Oh
yeah, he's in Tennessee. That's a long ride for me to go to sort out his home networking. But that's to be interesting. I knew that you're probably a Sixers fan. I thought I saw you post some stuff.
Anytime you can Ben Simmons shit post, I'm taking advantage of that.
So the funny thing about the game tonight was that the way they were broadcasting it, you could hear the fans in Boston. From the announcer's desk, and it would be a terrible call, and they kept having it sounded like a 15-year-old girl screaming, "What the hell, ref? Are you?" And it's like she's talking right behind the announcers. It was cracking me up.
Wasn't there
those Boston fans are
wasn't
scary.
There a thing in the last couple of weeks or something where one of the players, the daughter or something, was in the crowd? Just the daughter of one of the players was in the crowd, and she would just yell like a friggin' maniac whenever the opposition was taking a free throw, and it was quite noticed. They thought that she might have balanced the game. she might have tipped the game over because the daughter of one of the players was just screaming something, in that way that a young lady is just like, a shrill voice that cuts through everything.
Imagine an entire, well, that's like going to a NSYNC concert or something back in the day. You hear that, it's the shrill of a.
Did you go to a lot of NSYNC concerts, Steve?
Oh no, I wish. Oh man, I was stuck with what's the knockoff one? Like 98, 97 degrees
98
or something.
Degrees.
Yeah. See, I didn't even get 98. I only got 97.
You set me up for that.
Or like,
Joe knew what it was.
Yeah.
Dear me. All right, gentlemen. Well, we've had a nice chat today. So, Joe, thank you very much for taking your evening to come and talk to us. So, Mortal Kombat, that's the next steps for you. Is it still working on Mortal Kombat, just to round us out?
Yeah, Mortal Kombat. I'm hoping to have a video out on that. Had a little bit of a hiatus here with some health issues, but I'm hoping to have Mortal Kombat video out in the next week or two.
Nice.
Awesome.
Good. All right.
Looking forward to that.
Happy, healthy. Joe, thank you very much. Steve, thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode of the Cathode Ray podcast. Very interesting discussion about arcade boards. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
And stop.